Good evening, Jeff. How are you, dear?
Hey, I'm well. How about yourself?
Oh, God. Oh, my God. What a day. What a day. Thank
Hmm.
God all days are not like today. First
I
of
can
all,
say amen to that. Yeah.
yeah. So, and to the week. I mean, what a week we're having.
Mm.
Um, but, class is in session because why? Class is always in session.
Hmm.
Um, but look at how festive your background is. We're balanced. Your tree is on one side, mine is on the other.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. And yeah, at least I'm not running around the house trying to get ready for the show as the show is starting, like last week. Okay. So my mother says to me, "You look like a goddess." I said, "Well, I need to find the crown. Then I need to straighten the crown." Okay. And then, okay, mom. All right. Don't scream for help for 2 hours. Okay. Because she does. I mean, a
Yeah.
hangnail, honest to God,
Yeah.
help, nurse, help, nurse. I'm like,
Aw.
oh, bless her heart. Oh my God. It's been one of those days.
Mm.
We had workers in and out of the house all day long, whole new furnace, a whole new HVAC, the whole 9 yards. Everything that has to do with heating and air conditioning got replaced in this house today.
Oh, wow.
The whole system broke down at 7:30 this morning. At 7:45, the 5 workers were at the door ready to go.
Wow. Mm.
Oh my God. Don't the universe, you
Mm.
got to ask yourself sometimes with the whole universe thing, like, what does it know that we don't know?
Right.
Which is, I think, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, that was just a little bit of it. I also got all my Christmas cards and my packages and everything out today. Christine left for the post office at 4:15 this afternoon.
Oh, wow.
I have 2x4s laying all over the floor behind where something outside has to be rebuilt. One of the workers is still here doing it. So if there's any loud crashes, bangs, or booms, you'll
Mhm.
know it's our last straggler worker that is still here at 9 o'clock at night
Mm.
with those bar lights, those heavy duty bar lights working
Yeah.
in pitch black otherwise.
Mm.
Unbelievable. What a day. Oh
Mm.
my God. Oh, I hear power tools. I hear power tools. Oh, Jesus God. At least I'm not having to use the power tools. That's good. We're good.
That's a
So
plus. Yeah.
it is. It's a plus. And you're feeling a little under the weather?
I am. It's been one of those days. So I was home today. I think I stayed in bed until about 10:30, which is unusual for me because I'm usually up
Crack
6,
of
if not
dawn.
earlier.
Yep.
So yeah. But yeah, it's okay. I'll make it. I'll get through. But yeah, just not feeling the greatest physically.
Yeah.
Spiritually, mentally, and every other way, I feel wonderful. But
Good.
physically, it's one of those where the old
Yeah.
vehicle maybe needs a tune up here.
I was like that yesterday.
Hmm.
I was like that where I was cursing my body and wanting desperately to trade it in for a newer model.
Mm.
A lot of people who are watching know that about, gosh, a year and a half ago, I was in the Columbus airport, Ohio.
Mm.
And you know how you got a piece of luggage and you lift the handle up and then you kick the bottom to pull it back so you can roll it on 2 wheels, right? And carry,
Yeah.
total on. So all I did was I kicked the bottom of the suitcase and it felt like an ice pick got jammed into the back of my Achilles heel.
Mm.
And it blew up like a balloon. It filled with fluid. It swelled my entire ankle, and I had to go through an entire weekend event on my feet for 16 hours a day
Mm.
with my heel feeling like I'm I'm like gonna. Linny and Jeff ran to the pharmacy. I think it was Lynn and Jeff, or it was Michelle and Mark. Somebody went and got me a foot brace, which I'm still using, by the way. And thank you so much for that. So sweet. It couldn't have been cheap. They wouldn't take a dime. I'm like, are you kidding me? You just saved my life. I'm going to be able to get through this event because of what you did.
Yeah.
But still, and then they just helped me get around all weekend long. Well, I've been living with this pain ever since, because I went briefly to my doctor and said, what do we do about this? And the response was, it will heal on its own. There's not really anything we can do. Okay. It's 1.5 years later. I can barely walk on my right foot. The whole back of my heel is so black and blue that it looks like somebody painted a bruise onto it.
It's still like that to this.
Yeah. And I don't know. And now the pain is working its way up my leg.
Mm.
I'm like, no,
Jeez.
no. I can't do what I do and be in chronic, constant pain every step I take.
Yeah.
And yesterday it was just particularly painful. Christine, my sister Christine, just really tore me up about how self-neglectful I am, and how she's appalled by the fact that, I go to the doctor once a decade when I'm on my deathbed. And other than that, I avoid them like the Black Plague. She is the polar opposite. She takes such good care of herself, head to toe. Excuse me. See, I'm still sick. You're on Medicare. You're paying to go see a doctor, and you still won't go see a doctor. I'm like, oh, I'll go after the holidays.
Right.
I'm busy. Oh, so,
Hey, I don't necessarily want to say you're in good company, but you're at least in company, because I'm the same way. So I resist until I'm just like,
until I'm almost dead, and then I go.
Yeah. And in my mind, because I'm like, I'm an introvert, and as an introvert, we tend to live in our heads. And so we kind of live in a reality that isn't the same reality everyone else lives in. Like I can lose physical contact with people for years and carry on an internal relationship with them, just in that I think about them often. And so to me, in my mind, I feel like I just saw them and I just talked to them. And then I'm like, it's been 3 years. What are you talking about? It's the same way with the doctor with me. I just got my text for my yearly checkup. And I was like, yearly checkup? When's the last time I went? 2019 is the last time I went for my checkup. And then
that's the last time I did too.
Yeah, well, there you go.
2019, when I had COVID and they didn't even know what the fuck it was.
Yeah.
And it was killing me.
You're in company. I won't say good or bad, but you're in company. And I did go, like, I did a visit for like a concern I had like about a year or so ago, but like for my annual like wellness checkup and everything, I don't know. And then I hit, I turned, what did I turn? Oh yeah, 21 this year. No, I'm just kidding. Add 20.
No, I think that's your eldest child. No.
Yeah, that's not too far away. So I turned an age this year, and I thought to myself, okay, you know what? It's time. I got a family. I got to take care of this old body of mine. But this didn't get me there yet. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. It's that.
Yeah.
So tonight, now that, we've gone through each other's aches and pains and foibles and flaws, we're going to talk about the holidays. We're going to talk about, how everybody, well, let me preface my opening remarks with, my mother taught me many decades ago how to be happy even if I'm miserable. And I think that of all the things that I learned from her, that was the most valuable, because I can find a way, even when I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm cranky, I'm just disgruntled with life, I feel oppressed by 3D, I feel, and I can still be happy. And so mom taught me how to be happy being miserable, because miserable is part of the life experience. And there are many people this time of year who are suffering from loneliness and despair and a loss that they can't get past, an empty seat at the table.
Mm.
Oh, there's a nasty, nasty bug that just flew on the computer.
Hmm.
Oh, it's one of those that immigrated from China.
Mm.
Oh, God. All right.
One of those beetles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't crush them because they smell so bad that they're
Right.
called stink bugs and you have to
Yeah.
leave the house.
Yeah.
I'll just let it die slowly in the house, I guess. That's all I can do because it's cold out, so they're coming in.
Yep.
Well, my attitude is if you don't help pay the mortgage, then you really don't belong in here,
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the dogs and the cat are completely absolved from any responsibility.
Right.
In fact, they treat us like we're the servants and they're the ones that pay all the bills.
Yeah.
But that's them. And so,
My TV's going off in the background too. I don't know. I'm sorry about that. So
it's okay. It's all right. I've got mine on too. I just have it muted. So,
okay. Yeah.
whatever.
Enjoy the show, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know what's
Enjoy the
playing
show.
behind me.
Yeah. So, I wanted to address that with you, my darling, because part of being a minister, which even though you're no longer affiliated with a specific church or a specific religion, I still consider you a pastor, a minister, one that helps others, and very much a healer. Which is all, by the way, what all of A World Awakening is going to be about in an hour, or just short of an hour. So if you want to lay in bed and just listen, I
Yeah.
think that it will be wonderfully helpful to you. I hope
Okay.
so anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
But I feel such tremendous empathy. I didn't know 6 months ago if we would have another Mother's Day with my mother, and we did. I didn't know if she would see her 84th birthday on August 24th, and she did. And I feel now, having just gotten through a particularly difficult time, and having a med adjustment that worked miracles, we're going to have her for Christmas, and we're going to have her into 2024. And I feel certain of that because she could not be receiving more tender, loving care than she is. It's just not possible. And she's so sweet and she's so funny. And she says to me, "How did you get a job in this facility?" I'm like, "This facility is home, Mom. Okay, you're home. Like we promised that you always would be. And you're never going in a hospital. You're never going to a nursing home. We have all the equipment. We have everything that we need right here. Both of us know how to use it. Cindy's just down the road. Nancy is a healthcare worker, a home healthcare worker. If she has to come up, she will. So
Yeah.
from Florida, she's in Florida. I'm in Georgia. And it's just so sweet, but it didn't have to go this way. We could be facing our first Christmas without Mom in our lives. We all know it.
Yeah.
So I feel tremendous gratitude, but I also feel empathy and sympathy for those who I commiserate with on their own behalf, and be that shoulder to cry on and be that person to listen, because there is no consoling inconsolable grief. There's just not. All you can do is just be there for someone. And, it occurred to me as I was thinking about this during the week, and I sent you a couple of messages and back and forth the way that we always do. If people knew how we put the show together, they would just howl. I mean, it's all done like right here in a text message. We hardly, it's how we are.
Yeah.
We read each other's minds. We almost like, I'll make a suggestion and that's what you were thinking about, or vice versa, So
Always.
yeah. So I was thinking about this and about, how to comfort those that feel so uncomfortable in this time, this period, and to remind people that going way back in history, and I want you to, as the resident scholar, go back to, the beginning of the harvest and the Celtic tradition and the Picts and, the people of Europe that really started now what are our standard traditions, Judeo-Christian traditions. Hanukkah has been absorbed into our national psyche, Christmas, Festivus. What's the other one? What's the one from Africa? Kwanzaa. Yeah. I mean, this is a time where people celebrate leaving one year and going into another one. The harvest has been taken in. All the work, the heavy work is done. It is the commemoration of the birth of Jesus. It is, the season of lights. It is the season of giving and hope. And what I like to remind people is that, that feeling that is engendered in us at this time of year, that we're also responsive to. The reason that we're also responsive to it is because the entire focus of the season is doing for others, not what we get or how we are acknowledged, but what we can do, no matter how much stress it causes.
Yeah.
What we can do to help others and to be there for others. But this is a very, very long, quote unquote, tradition in humanity. So I want you to talk about it and speak to it. And I'm sure you did some research. I know you very well. If it wasn't stuff that you already knew, you went there. So why don't you just run with this as long as your voice holds out?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, pardon me. It is, I was just reading, I don't remember who the essay was by, but it's from Man and His Symbols, which Jung writes some for, and then some other Jungian scholars write in there as well, or Jungians write in that book as well. So I don't remember who the essay was from, but they were just speaking about the fact that, it doesn't really matter who you are. Around this time of year, there is this compulsion to celebrate something approximating the birth of the Savior, and again, I said something approximating, that is now the kind of philosophical and theological framework that whatever the spirit of this idea is passes through to get to us, because it is the predominant idea in the West. But this is a very ancient impulse. It goes back further than we actually have record.
Yes.
And everybody kind of wants to try to say where Christmas came from. And, you always get the accusation, you just co-opted pagan symbolism. And there's some truth to that. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of these records are really lost to us. We don't really, and the reason that so many of these things are lost to us is because Christians of another ilk, when we crossed into certain lands, destroyed most of the documents that would have allowed us to unlock the beauty
our
of
human history,
our traditions.
In the name of Jesus Christ, here.
That's, unfortunately, that's the name a lot of evil is done in, when that's the name that was actually supposed to bring healing to humanity. But that's just how it goes, unfortunately. But there's all these festivals that all take place this time of year, and even Hanukkah, which, Hanukkah, or the Festival of Lights, the Feast of the Dedication. It's first mentioned, one of the oldest mentions of the Feast of Hanukkah is in the Gospel of John, actually,
Right.
which is probably which means it was a pretty new celebration, probably at the time, because this is celebrating essentially the liberation of Judea from the kind of oppressive reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, depending on how one says that. And, the altar fires in the temple had not been lit for something like 4 years. And so the reigniting of the altar fires, which according to the Torah were meant to be kept burning continually, when those fires were reignited, that's the origin of the Festival of Lights. And I believe it's a later medieval tradition where they kind of came up with the idea of the oil lasting more days than it should have. But the origin of the feast, what Jesus would have been celebrating in the Gospel of John, when it's called the Feast of the Dedication, was the celebration of the reigniting of the altar fires, but it was still a celebration of light. And the funny thing is it takes place the same time of year as Christmas now takes place for us. But Christmas, Jesus was likely there. The only reason that we celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th, it has some things to do with the tweaking of the calendar and all this kind of stuff. But it also has to do with the fact that you kind of have a good idea of when Jesus died because of Passover and of when it happened, or at least when he was purported to have died. And so there was like a literary trope, in antiquity, where someone's birthday and death day would match one another. And so I think it was March 25th where they deduced he died. And then they went back not to his time of birth, but what they assumed then would have been the time of his conception.
Right.
And that was December 25th. And so that's one of the reasons that date came about. Anyways, but another reason that date is chosen, again, it has to do with some tweaking of the calendar and things like that took place in centuries past. But it also has to do with the fact that when Christians crossed the Alps, they encountered a culture they had not encountered before, the Celts.
Right.
And
that's where I come from.
Yeah.
Pagans.
Yeah. And a friend of mine, Dr. Alexander John Shia, who does some brilliant work on Christmas, and I think I mention him every year just because I highly encourage anyone out there who has interest in the history of Christmas. He's an anthropologist. He studied with and under Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist. He's brilliant. He's a Jungian, brilliant individual. But so check out his work. It's called Quadratos, Quadratos. Look that up and you'll find it. I have several interviews I've done with him on my own podcast, and they've always been great. Anyways, but he talks about the fact that Christianity, specifically, because he's talking about it from that perspective, when it's at its best, when it's operating as it should, doesn't barge into other cultures and say, your story sucks. Let me replace it with ours.
With our story. Yep.
Yeah.
Our story's better. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Which is how it's often done today. But Christianity, when it's at its best, actually enters into a culture, and it's seeking to tell a universal story. It's seeking to tell a universal tale, because real Orthodox Christianity is not the bullshit we see today of you were born hopelessly tainted by original sin, totally depraved, and then you have to come to this place later in life where you believe on Jesus personally, and then you're saved from hell because you're born damned and all this other stuff. That is absolutely not historically what Christians taught or believed. That's a very, very young and new idea.
Yeah.
Orthodox Christianity, which is Christianity in its most ancient form, believed that what happened in Jesus was a cosmic, universal event. Universalism, the belief that there is no hell that anyone goes to, is the oldest belief in Christianity. It was the predominant belief for the first 1,000 years of Christianity. And so Orthodox Christianity saw what happened in Jesus as being a universal thing. They saw it as being a sort of resetting of humanity and a universal salvation that happened to everybody because it happened in this prototypical man, Jesus. And so now what their mission was to go and tell people what had already happened to them and what had been happening throughout their entire existence that they simply weren't aware of. And one of the ways this was done was by seeing in the stories that were already present the universal story that's present everywhere, and not going in and saying, again, this is a terrible story, let me replace it with a better one, but by going in and being like, oh, wow, our stories are the same. They're different. The imagery, the symbolism is different, but oh, wow, the same story is there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. You take the sheet off the invisible man, and it's the same invisible man underneath. You know what I mean? I might throw a red sheet over him, you might throw a blue sheet over him, and so, but it's the same spirit that's underneath it.
Mhm.
And so what happened with the Celts is that, to make a very long story short, their solstice celebration, right? It celebrates basically the return, the dying of the light that takes place on the solstice, which is the darkest night of the year for us in the northern hemisphere, right? It's when we are furthest from the sun. It doesn't necessarily work that way, but that's a fine way of speaking of it. It's when we're the furthest from the sun, if you will. And so it's the darkest night of the year. And so, but then the beautiful thing is that takes place, that's the 21st? 21st. And so then the 24th is when the light and the radiance begins to return, which is Christmas Eve. And early Christians actually likened that unto English, speaking Christians, likened that unto Eve, as in Adam and Eve. Eve as in the mother of all of humanity, that this is something like a new Eve. It is the eve or the evening prior to the birth of universal salvation. And it's also, it's the darkest night of the year, but it represents new birth, right? It's the darkest of eves, but it represents new life and new birth coming forth, which is actually, you see images and depictions of the Black Madonna, right? Now, it's a beautiful way to celebrate African culture as well. But originally, actually, the image of the Black Madonna was actually meant to represent that exact thing. It was meant to represent the darkness of the eve prior to the birth of Christ. And the symbolism was that from the darkest of nights can come forth the brightest of
light.
Because here's the fact. When it's at its darkest, it means that it can't go anywhere but up after this. Exactly. When it's at its darkest, it means that the very next step and the very next move is going to be moving back towards the light. So it's on that day that the radiance begins to return. And this is one of the reasons why this day was chosen in particular as a way of communicating to this culture that already had these feasts, the universal story. And that's the beauty of it, is that at the darkest moment, light and radiance is returning, right? Light is being born when things are at their darkest, because when things are at their darkest, they can't do anything but get brighter, right? And that's the beauty. And trust me, I have taken so much comfort in this message over the years. Mm-hmm. There have been times I've just sat in my living room with the Christmas tree on, and this is my little study area, but my living room, and just sat there looking at the tree. Everything else, I've got lights everywhere in my house. It's festive everywhere. But turn everything off but that tree and just stare at it and just weep, because there have been times at this time of year I was plunged into a deep, deep darkness. There were times, this season is not one of those, but there have been times at this time of year when I was in absolute despair. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are there.
Yeah. And which is why I can relate to and feel those that suffer. And, and I hope so much that what we do brings some comfort, some ease to the dis-ease that people so often feel at this time of year.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, but when you see the lights of Christmas, right? When you see those lights, everything okay?
I think so. Keep talking. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the reasons that, we decorate at Christmas, we put up lights or we light candles in days gone by, is because it was seen as decorating the dark. It was seen as a way of, like Andrea always says, school is always in session, but we announce school is in session when we start this show, because this is a moment where we deliberately enter into soul school, even though we're always in soul school. In the same way, when we light lights in the darkness, right? When we light lights in the darkness of winter, we are accentuating the fact that even though things seem dark as, coal, and like it can't go, like everything around us is pitch black, we string up lights and we light candles to celebrate the fact that though it seems like this, the deeper reality is that the light is returning. And so again, even as we say class is in session at the beginning of soul school, but school is always in session, we just deliberately celebrate the fact that we're learning for this hour. During this season, the light is always there. That's always the deepest reality, but we light lights at this time of year to acknowledge the fact that that is the deepest reality. And so, how would you say this? That's the real celebration. That's really the underlying core message, is that from the womb of the darkest of Eves comes forth the light, right? It's always that way. It's always that way. It seems kind of cliche because it sounds like the line from the Dark Knight movie, that, the night is darkest just before dawn. But that's true, right?
It's true. It's not true. A cliche. It's true.
No. And the earth is the darkest just before the turning, when it begins to return. That's how it works. And it seems like the longest of nights. It seems like it will never end. It seems like you'll never get over this thing. You'll never heal from this. You'll never bounce back, financially, relationally, whatever it is. We all know what it's like to be in those dark, dark nights. And God, have I been in some? I know you've been in some. I know the listeners have been in some. And when you're in them, when you're in the middle of them, it just seems like the sun will never rise. It's like I wake up when it's dark. It's dark. It's dark. And winter kind of has that effect on you anyways. If you're a working person.
It's called light deprivation for a reason.
It is.
Light disaffective disorder. It's in the DSM-4. It's in the list of maladies that affect human beings.
Yeah.
The lack of light has a dramatic effect on a lot of people. Just changing our clocks.
Yeah.
Going back, fall back 1 hour screws everybody up for weeks.
Right.
And it's part of that cyclical, we've talked so much on this show about the cyclical nature of life. And I think that part of us finding our way is through, and we also, you and I both know well, both being teachers, that it is, we learn by repetition and nostalgia and sentimentality is what bubbles up around this time of year. All the memories of our childhood, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything comes and just rushes like a geyser from a well to the surface.
Yep.
And we experience everything during this period of time every year.
Yeah.
And yet we look forward to it. Many people look forward to it every year, knowing it's going to be, an emotional tumult, knowing, but it's part of our family traditions.
Yeah.
It's part of, and why that matters so much to us is, I think, because it's like hardwired into our DNA. It's ingrained into us. It's like the stories that were told, as we pass down, the elders and so on. It's before there was even written words, the stories were told and passed down. And it seems to be intrinsic to our human nature to do so. Yeah. And it brings us comfort and joy, like the song says.
Yeah. And too, I just kind of felt to maybe say this because when we talk about the cyclical nature of things, right? And we talk about the fact that every year there is built into our celebrations. And this is the beautiful thing about myth. We don't understand myth today. We think we equate myth with fairy tale. We equate myth with fiction. Myth is a truth that is so deep that it's truer than spoken truth. It can only be communicated through story. It can only be communicated through ritual, right? And so we enact this myth every year, and we don't always know what we're enacting, but when we hear it spelled out, it makes sense
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
ingrained in us because we've been celebrating it all of our lives.
A
And then
whole
when
lot.
someone points it out to us, we're like, oh, I get it now, right? It's there. It's like this, like one of those little sponges that they shove into the capsules and then you dissolve it in water and it's like right, it's
Yeah.
like the tradition because we've celebrated all of our lives, it's in our souls like that. And when the water of kind of a explanation hits it comes to life within and we're like, oh, I get it now.
Good
So
sound effects, Jeff. Really good.
thank you I've got kids, I'm good. No, but talking about the cyclical nature of things, we talk about the fact that this is a cycle. That this is a cycle. Not only are we talking about a natural cycle of the quote unquote dying of the sun and then the rebirth and all that, but there's also a cycle in life that things die and things are reborn. Things die and things are reborn. And when you talk about that as being a cycle of life, well, if you're in the middle of the death thing right now and somebody tells you it's a cycle, well, that can be very discouraging because
Yeah.
you don't want to experience this again. You're in the worst pain you've ever been in your life. And the last thing you want is someone to come along and tell you, oh, don't worry, it'll happen again. I mean, you want to believe that you'll exit this and you'll never feel this again. Well, I can't promise you that. But what I can promise you is this. Every time you pass through, yes, these things are cyclical. However, passing through them, it's never the same. Okay. That when you go into the next season, you won't be the same person you are now. And so the cycle isn't the same.
Right.
It's like if you're going up on the piano, right? And you're playing your scales, so you've got if you do it, you've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are the chords you have basically. Okay. If you're doing it in the Nashville number system, there's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They connect to one of those things. So let's say you're playing in the key of A, or let's say you're playing in the key of G, right? And you go up G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. You start at G, and then you climb up the scales and you go to G again, right? So if you're climbing up, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, the second G you hit, it's an octave higher. It's not the same G you left, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you go up, yes, now you're back to where you're going to go G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G again, but you're an octave higher than you were this time, right? And so, yes, it's a cycle, it's seasonal and it's cyclical, but every time you move through it, you're moving up, right? You're moving up the fretboard, you're moving up the keys, you're going higher and higher and higher. So while it's cyclical and while these things happen again and again and again, they take you higher and higher and higher. And so every passage through the cycle is elevating you and taking you higher. And so there will but it's important to know that it's cyclical so that when you're in the middle of it again, oh, this will pass, right? I'm going to get through this. I'm just going up the scales. And when I hit G, right, which I'm leaving, I was comfortable here. I was back in G, and now I'm leaving G, and it's uncomfortable. But I'm going back to G. You're not going back to G. You're going back to G, but up an octave.
An
And
octave.
sometimes you'll jump 3 or 4, right? Depending on the dynamism of the song that's being played in your life, you might jump up 3 or 4. And you might go down, but then you're going to go back up. Like, I mean, that's just how it works. That's how the music of life and reality works. So when you hear talk of things being cyclical, don't think it means that you're just stuck.
Like a hamster on a wheel.
Exactly. Like that. That's why the symbol of the Ouroboros, the Ouroboros serpent, right? Eating its tail.
Yeah.
That's why to some practitioners in certain fields, that's considered a terrible omen and a terrible symbol because it's like, oh, it's just repetition. It's not repetition. it's it's every passage you change. Every passage you change. That's why Nietzsche's Zarathustra, his symbol of the overman, is the eagle, is the eagle with the serpent wrapped around it as though it's a friend, because the embracing of the cyclical nature of life, but not as a curse, but as a blessing, because it's what advances you. The eagle embracing it, it flies because it embraced it as a friend, which is just so beautiful. And I think that's the, even in the scripture, it talks about, Yahweh, taking off the head of the Leviathan, and Leviathan is synonymous with the Ouroboros serpent. And one of the things I like about that is taking the head means separating the tail from the head, so you don't see it as this like repeating pattern that you can't escape, but you see the pattern, and in the pattern you actually find liberation. That's why I always tell people the only way forward is to move in a sacred circle. We think we move forward linearly. Well, then you're just endlessly marching towards some mythological horizon that may or may not even exist. The way forward is to move in circles. And every time you come back to the top of that circle, you're changed. And yes, there's a cycle and a season you pass through again, but it's to get you back here. You're moving up the scales, right? You're moving up the scales. It's never just the same low G or whatever note on the piano. You're going up, 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 up every time. It's why scripture says we go from glory to glory. But the way we go from glory to glory is by moving in that circle. But you're not chasing your tail. You're not going in circles in that sense. You're going up, up. And every time you make that circle, every time you make that loop, there's so much more complexity now because of what you passed through. You are a different being.
Yeah.
You are a creator of a different kind when you come back to that same note, but a higher octave. There's so much more behind you now than there was before. And so therefore there's so much more to you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just felt to say that to anyone who, when they hear us talk about cycles, feel like it's a trap. It's not a trap. It's the way we grow. The only way forward is to move in circles, right? Read Deleuze, difference in repetition. Repetition is how change occurs. Mm-hmm. That's where complexity builds. And the more, and we talked about this a couple of months ago a lot, but the more complexity builds, the more raw material there is for creation to take place. Mm-hmm. Right? So anyways, I just felt to say that. You got something you wanted to say?
Well, I think it's interesting, when two people fall in love and they decide to commit to each other, what is the symbol that they use mm-hmm. for eternal love is a ring.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah.
But we chose traditionally a ring, mm-hmm. which is a perfect circle.
Yeah.
That we assimilate into, onto our bodies to a symbol of I'm taken or not. Mm-hmm. Or just a promise kept. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's so beautiful because I consider the circle, the ring, to be, all you have to do, you want to see how common it is in the universe, look up into the sky.
Yeah.
Every planet, every star, every sun, every supernova, every, all at least begin as perfectly round.
Yeah.
Or they evolve into being perfectly round. Mm-hmm. So there is something about that geometric form that is essential to us.
I think so.
And so in terms of, ethos, in terms of mythological, even in terms of what some refer to as the Akashic records, mm-hmm. that like what always has been and what always will be, that is the singular symbol that I see contextually in all things.
Agreed. Yeah. No, agreed 100%. And then, so what, Excuse me.
I know, me too. I'm
Sorry,
still sucking
guys.
down ice chips. It's
Here we
ridiculous.
go. Cheers
Cheers.
to a clearer voice here in a half second.
Mm.
Okay,
Oh,
so one of the things then is that yes, that circle it represents tradition. It represents that cyclical nature. That is a sacred part of life, and critical theories of any kind concern themselves with breaking the circle.
mhm.
But there's also a time for stopping and acknowledging the power of that circle,
Yeah,
whatever it is, the power of tradition.
yeah.
And I think the way we recognize that is by breaking it the first time around, realizing that in its literal form it had to be broken, and then coming back to it in a chosen naivete, in the same way that as a
Mhm.
child you go through cycles in your beliefs concerning one Saint Nicholas. You believe it a certain way as a young child. As an adolescent and teenager, you believe in it or disbelieve in it. And then as an adult, you come to believe in it again as a parent or as a lover of anyone, right? You
Mhm.
come to embody what you once believed in a more naive way, you come back to.
Mhm.
And that's the circle, right? And, so like I said, any kind of critical theory, whatever it is usually concerned with breaking the circle because they see it as an
Mhm.
oppressive thing, and it can be when you only approach it in that naive way. Tradition of any kind can be, but man, we're cyclical creatures. We are creatures who evolved in the context of ritual, right?
Yeah.
And I think our society could use a good dose of that. I really
I
do.
do too. And I mean, when you look at it, Jeff, I mean, just look back a couple of hundred years at the settling of this continent, as the pillagers came in, like us
Mm,
from Western Europe and just took it.
mm,
Um, but a circle, the phrase circling the wagons
mm,
has a very specific meaning. There would be a large communal fire in the middle as the pioneers were crossing together for protection. And they would stop, they would circle the wagons so that there was literally no spot around the fire,
mm,
which is life. And the circling of the wagons
mm,
made sure that the fire remained undisturbed
mm.
so that it could be the giver of life, food, and so on and so forth, heat. um but the wagons protected not only those within the confines of that circle,
Yeah.
it also protected the fire.
Yeah.
So when we say now, we just throw it off the cuff as just a common phrase. Oh, trying to circle the wagons, the marauders are here, or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a very, very specific meaning and an actual manifestation of a human behavior
Yeah.
that prompted that phrase. And we
Yeah.
just use it off the cuff as though it's meaningless, but it has this very intricate history. And it
Yeah.
makes, what do you mean 5 minutes, Bill? Bill needs a new
Wow.
clock for Christmas, honey, because obviously his is incorrect.
Yes.
How did this happen? Really?
I have no
Oh,
idea. Actually, yeah. Wow.
you
Well,
know?
and you know something, Andrea, I love that, and this kind of went this went a different way than I thought it was going to go, but I
Mhm.
really like where it went,
Me too.
um, because this is not only uh, we're paranormal people, okay? So the
Yeah.
people listening to this understand what I'm about to say, and I've said it a dozen times in the past, anyways. But in the world of ufology, obviously, um, there's crafts aplenty to choose from, shape wise.
Mhm.
However, if you say UFO, right, to your average person,
Mhm.
not someone who's steeped in the history of it, but your average person, what do they think of? They think, oh, flying
Flying
saucer.
saucer.
They think a circle. They think
Round.
a disc. Exactly. They think a disc. If you read Jung's UFOs, modern flying saucers, rather, a modern myth of things seen in the sky. He talks about what he believed the phenomenon represented. Now, we could debate about whether that is what it is or not. I don't know, but at the very least, um, we're projecting onto this phenomenon, I think, exactly what he said, which is that the circle is that mandalic symbol of wholeness, that
Mhm.
circle, that symbol of unity and wholeness that's in all cultures, right? And one of the birth and the dawn of this movement in the United States happens in the aftermath of what takes place in the Trinity site
Mhm.
in New Mexico, which was just explored in the movie Oppenheimer that came out this year.
Mhm.
Okay, where that first atomic bomb is tested and goes off. And what do? We go to the very heart of reality, the atom, the thing that binds everything together symbolically, and we split it apart. We break the circle, right?
Yeah.
And what happens? Well, then we come up with all kinds of new and nasty ways to destroy one another.
Yeah.
And just in the aftermath of that, the first or the what gives rise to the modern movement, that is this movement, a craft crashes. There's a lot of lore surrounding it and whatever. Jacques Vallée has a great book on it called
Mhm.
Trinity, I think, the missing key. But Oppenheimer, J. Robert Oppenheimer, was meditating on the poem of a metaphysical Christian poet, John Donne, called Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God. It was about the Trinity. He said that's why he believed he named it Trinity, the Trinity site. He said he wasn't exactly sure why, but that was in his unconscious. And at the Trinity location, we split the quote unquote the fabric of the universe apart, right?
Right.
And the Trinity in ancient Christian language is perichoresis, which means to move in a circle. That's
Right.
what the Trinity was thought of being: Father, Son, and Spirit moving in this circle dance with one another. We split the circle apart. We have this explosion and the capacity now to destroy one another. And out of it emerges the symbol of the disc, which is now unleashed in the unconscious and haunts us all in the skies and in our minds, calling us back to that place of circular, cyclical wholeness. And
Well, this was
yeah,
fun.
this was.
I love you so much, honey. Go back to
About
bed.
you. Yes.
Listen to A World Awakening if you can. And
Yes.
hopefully you will get the same kind of healing that I am selfishly going to avail myself of with my guests tonight.
Yes.
I love you with all my heart. I'll talk to you during the week.
All right.
And, for all of you that are with us tonight, I wish you the very best and all bright blessings during this season of light.
Absolutely.
And be the light you seek and be the verb love.
Hmm.
Spread it liberally everywhere that you go and every heart that you touch. We love you and we'll see you next week. And with that, class is
That's all.
dismissed.
Peace.